ready to start a very intellectually stimulating weekend. So we're going to begin by pondering a very important question. What do you guys think is the greatest asset an organization has? Now, some people might think that it's their cutting-edge technology. Some might say it's trade secrets. But studies have shown that companies that invest in their people are more likely to be successful as a whole. They have more profit and less turnover. So we're going to start the day with a very interesting topic around people development and relationship building. I'm ecstatic to announce our first keynote speaker, who has been developing leaders for 25 years and executive coaching for 12 years. She has worked with companies like Cox Communications, Fox Sports, Towers Watson, Girl Scouts, and HD Supply. She has also co-authored a book called Developing Human Performance, which covers topics like building skills for diversity, collaboration, and change, and holds multiple certifications in emotional intelligence. Please welcome our professional coach, Dawn Cook of Daybreak Enterprises.
Thank you, Saba. Good morning. How are you this morning? Are you as happy to be here as I am? Yes? Good, good. It's my pleasure to be here with you. I was so honored when I was invited to come and speak about one of my favorite topics, which is emotional intelligence. Oh, I said the E word. I just saw 3 guys running out the back door. I'm going to be using the E word quite a bit today, so I hope you get used to it, right? Emotional intelligence, I truly believe, is the most important factor in your success. It's the foundation for our relationships with others, our relationships with ourselves. That's probably the most important, your relationship with yourself. Have you ever thought about that? What kind of relationship do you have with yourself? Do you have positive self-talk? Do you have negative self-talk? Have you thought about it? That's part of being self-aware, which we're going to talk a little bit more about today. If I could get my slides to show, please. So 90% of top performers are high in emotional intelligence. 90%. Employees who have high emotional intelligence average almost 30,000 more per year in their annual salaries. 40% of chief executives will fail in the first 18 months because they lack self-awareness, they lack empathy, or it's a poor culture fit. All of these have to do with their ability to manage relationships. So let's talk about failure for just a moment. I'll share a story with you about a young woman who failed quite a bit. She actually failed the bar twice. She tried her hand at stand-up comedy, failed at that. She sold fax machines around the Southeast. She failed day after day after day. Rejection after rejection after rejection. But she kept going. Her failure didn't get in her way. One night she was getting ready to go to a party. She had some cream slacks that she really wanted to wear, and she hadn't been able to wear them. They'd been in her closet for a month, and she hadn't been able to wear them because she couldn't find any underwear that wouldn't show through. Guys, I know you can relate to this. So she thought, what can I do? I really like the way the control top pantyhose help kind of shape me and make me smooth. But I want to wear open-toed shoes. I want to wear my sandals. So what'd she do? She cut the feet out of her control top pantyhose. She was telling her girlfriends what she did, and then come to find out they did the same thing. And then she saw Oprah do it on television. And she thought, you know what? There's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity. She actually thought about it and said, you know what? I have an intention. I want to create a product that I can sell to millions of people and make them feel good. What a great intention. Mind you, this woman had no business training. She had no knowledge of the retail industry, no clue how she was going to start a business. But she had an idea and a belief. She started doing research. For a year, she told nobody what she was doing because she didn't want the skepticism. She didn't want to be told no. So she kept it to herself. About a year into it, she finally shared it with her family and friends. And you know what they said? If it's such a great idea, sweetie, why hasn't somebody else done it? Again, the skepticism. She did not let it deter her. She kept at it. She researched and found that the best place, or where most of the manufacturers were for creating the products she had in mind, were in North Carolina. So she went to North Carolina. Time after time after time, rejection after rejection after rejection, failure, failure, failure. Did she let it stop her? No. Actually, it fueled her success because she continued in spite of that. And finally, one day, a manufacturer who had told her no called her up and said, okay, I'll take a chance on you. I talked to my 3 daughters about this product that you mentioned, and they thought it was a pretty good idea. They said, Dad, give her a chance. And the rest is history. That woman is Sarah Blakely, founder and creator of Spanx. Are you guys familiar with Spanx? Yes. Now, the reason I share her story is because she demonstrates at least 4, there's definitely more, but I'm going to talk about 4 emotional intelligence competencies. But before we get into what those are, let's give you a framework for emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is really the art and the science of leveraging emotions. And I say that because it really is, there's an art to being able to be emotionally intelligent, and there's science behind it. I'll talk a little more about the science in a moment. So Daniel Goleman is the person who brought emotional intelligence to the corporate workplace. He didn't invent the concept, but he brought it to the forefront with a book called Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than Intellect. Here's his model. Starting with self-awareness. We have to first know what is going on with us before we can do anything. What emotions are we feeling in the moment we're feeling them, and why are we feeling them? That's self-awareness. The next piece is self-management. Okay, so I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm feeling, I know why I'm feeling it. Now what? What do I do? How do I get past the frustration? How do I get past anger? How do I get past feeling rejected? Self-management is critical. And by the way, I think the research by Hay Group states that if you are self-aware, you have a 50% chance of self-managing. If you're not, you have a 4% chance. Okay? The next piece, if I got myself grounded, I know what I'm doing, now I can start looking outward. Now I can start looking at social awareness. Can I read the emotional topography in the room and recognize what's going on with others around me? And if I can, what do I do about that? The relationship management piece is sort of the culmination of all of that. How do I navigate relationships so that I have productive outcomes? You know, emotional intelligence really is the foundation of relationships, because relationships make the world go round. So we really need to have a good, solid emotional intelligence basis to work from. Now, the one thing I would like for you to take from this is that it's not just about the ability to demonstrate emotional intelligence. It's also about the choice. Let that sink in for just a moment. I can have the ability, I can know that if I want to be healthy, I'll go to the store and I'll buy salmon, broccoli, all the healthy foods. But what if I've had a really tough week? And I'm thinking, man, I could really use some Ben & Jerry's chocolate ice cream. And I buy that instead. I knew what to do. I had the ability, certainly, to go and buy salmon and broccoli, but I brought ice cream. Think about how that relates to you in the workplace. You know what to do, but in a moment of weakness, you choose something different. Choice is key. And we'll talk a little more about that in a moment. All right, so let's get back to Sarah Blakely and what she demonstrated of the 4 EQ competencies. And I say EQ is an abbreviation for emotional intelligence. You may already know that. So the first thing she demonstrated is strong self-regard. Do you know what you're capable of? And this isn't somebody who's egotistical. That's not what strong self-regard means. It means someone who understands their strengths and their limitations, but can leverage their strengths. She certainly demonstrated that. She also demonstrated the willingness to take risk. She tells a story about how her father, when they were kids, he would sit at the dinner table and he would ask she and her brother, "What did you try at this week and fail?" And if they didn't have anything to tell him, he was disappointed. But if she did, like she said, "Oh, I tried out for this and I was horrible," he'd high-five her. So what did he do by modeling that behavior? He trained her that there's no such thing as fear of failure. Take that risk. It's worth it. The next thing that she demonstrated was optimism. She believed that she could overcome obstacles to reach her goal. And did she encounter obstacles? You bet. Did she want to give up? You bet. Did she? No. Because she also demonstrated resilience. When you get knocked down, if you can get back up at least one more time than you were knocked down, you're golden. So these are some of the main competencies that she has demonstrated in her journey to be the self-made billionaire that she is. Can you imagine what it's like to work for someone like that? Someone who models emotional intelligence. She models optimism, resilience, encourages you to take risk. By a show of hands, how many of you have worked for an exceptional leader, a really great leader that you would follow to the ends of the earth? Yeah, a few hands are going up, okay. So what was it like to work for that leader? What were they like? Were they supportive? Did they actually empathize with you? Did they understand where you were coming from? Did they encourage you? Did they trust you? Did they empower you? Probably. Were they smart? Let's hope so. What they've shown is that intellect and technical skill together actually represent about 20% of our success. And our ability to interact with others and manage relationships is about 80%. So when you work for that amazing leader, what did you do? Were you feeling pretty good? Yes? Were you motivated? What did you actually do at work? Did you give 110% or 50? What? 110. Great, thank you. Sorry, a little bit hard of hearing at this age. Some of you don't understand that. You're in your 20s probably. So yeah, you'll give 110% for those people that actually make you feel good about yourself. What we've made the case for when we talk about that is something that if you take away nothing else from my conversation with you today, I want you to take away this message. And that is, emotions drive behavior, which drives performance. Powerful leaders understand this, and they leverage this. Think about that. In your own life, think about it. How do emotions drive your behavior and your performance? I'll be willing to bet that some of you have had a not so great leader. Anybody had that poor leader that you wouldn't follow to water if you were in the desert? Yeah, definitely saw some hands there. What's it like to work for them? What? Horrible. Yeah, so we're probably not feeling too motivated. We're not producing. Emotions drive behavior, drives performance. So I'll share a personal story with you about a gentleman that I was hired to work with, to coach with, an executive, who had earned the reputation as a bullying micromanager. We'll call him David. Now, David was brilliant. He was well educated. He had PhD from Harvard, I think, and MBA from Columbia. I mean, a whole list of credentials. He had probably more industry experience than anyone else that he worked with. He was by far the smartest man in the room. But guess what? He wanted you to know it. Do you ever know anybody like that? Yeah. So his team, although he had a very talented team, they felt like they were not really being utilized. Because every time they would have meetings, he would be the one with all the ideas. And he would squelch their ideas because his were better. Now, a lot of times they were better, but guess what happened after a period of time? What do you think the team stopped doing? Listening and bringing their ideas. It's like, why bother? He's not going to listen anyway. On top of that, he had a certain leadership style, I would say, that was not very effective. I actually interviewed his team, his peers, his manager, and a pattern emerged. They said he was extremely direct, very intolerant if you made a mistake, extremely impatient, like, why can't you get this? Keep up. And he had a habit of sending what they called e-turds. You can guess what those are, right? Emails that were really, really not very nice. He even jokingly would say, if you do that again, I'm going to cut you off at the knees. Ha ha ha. Thinking he was joking around. They didn't take it as a joke. So when I shared the feedback with him, I said, you know, David, your team has a love-hate relationship with you. They love how smart you are, but they hate how you make them feel. That was an eye-opener for him. He had no idea what his impact was. And that's the problem with lack of self-awareness. If you don't understand your impact, you can be going down the wrong path. And my guess is a lot of the people that I work with, I shouldn't say my guess, I understand a lot of people I work with, that is their struggle. They have what they think is good intent, but their impact is all wrong because their approach doesn't consider the relationship. See, if you've been successful to some degree, you've gotten to where you are because of your personal drive, which is also an emotional intelligence competency. You've been able to do things and get things done and achieve your goals. But when you get to a certain level, it's not about that anymore. It's about leveraging your relationships, which means you have to understand people. And people are made up of emotion. Anybody ever heard the term or even said the term, there's no such thing as emotions in business. You got to leave your emotions at the door. Well, I'm here to tell you, that's about as easy as leaving your cell phone at the door of a meeting. You guys can't do it, can you? We're addicted to those things. So, this gentleman, I'm happy to say, this is one of my proudest moments. He actually took to heart what he needed to do differently. He started recognizing when he was reacting. We came up with a mechanism for him to self-manage. He used the acronym STEER. Stop, think, empathize, evaluate, respond. I believe he still uses it to this day, and it's been 3 years, I think, since we coached. I gave him another technique for empathizing, which is called ARC. Ask, reflect, confirm. Very simple. But we usually leave out the reflect and confirm if we even ask. Because guess what we like to do? We hear just enough to jump to solution. But we don't hear the full story. We don't really understand what their challenge is. He started doing that. We gave him another way of brainstorming so that he actually was honoring input from his team. And guess what? Productivity started to soar. Creativity started to soar. Oh, and I forgot to mention, even though his department or his region was outperforming all the other regions in revenue generation by 35%, turnover was killing all those profits. His turnover went down. I had interviewed everyone at the beginning of the engagement and said, what are his leadership traits? And most of them said, good luck. Good luck with that. I interviewed them again at the end of our engagement. And one gentleman said, you know what? We are just trying to figure out how high of a statue we should erect in your honor. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, the turnaround in David's leadership style is amazing. We feel so much more engaged, so much more empowered. We don't feel micromanaged. I said, well, you know what? I don't deserve the credit. He did all the work. He's the one who invested in his emotional intelligence and his relationships, and it paid off big dividends. So I love that story because when you can see that you've made a difference and that they're then making a difference is the ripple effect. It all comes back to relationships. If you want to be successful, you've got to build your relationships. And if you're going to build relationships, you'll be more successful if you use emotional intelligence. Shifting gears just a little bit. Have you guys ever seen, I don't think all of you in here are old enough to remember the Brady Bunch show, but some of you might. All of you have seen the Super Bowl commercials, and you probably saw this one about Marsha Brady being so upset, and she's like, ready to slam the hammer down because somebody made her mad or whatever, and they're like, Marsha, you're just not yourself. Eat a Snickers. Have y'all seen that commercial? Okay, so the moral of the story is you're not yourself when you're angry or when you're hungry. She was, in this case, hangry. Anybody in here get hangry? Yeah? Okay, we do have food outside if you need it. We have certain things that will trigger us. And it's really important to know when we get triggered. Why? Because, again, self-awareness is huge. So do you know what triggers you? Have you thought about what kind of sets you off so that you're not really on top of your game? There's actually an acronym that you can follow to get some of the major triggers. It's called HALT. And I've expanded it to include an S on the end. So it's ironic that what triggers us as adults is actually the same thing that triggers babies. When do babies cry? They're hungry. When they're wet and angry. When they're lonely, they need to be picked up. Tired, they need a nap. Or when they're scared. So let's think about this in the workplace. You could be hungry for food, yes, and get hangry, but couldn't you also hunger for appreciation, acceptance, approval, acknowledgement? You work your butt off and nobody notices? Would that be triggering? Time after time after time? Angry. If you feel like you have not been heard, understood, if someone takes away your control and micromanages you, is that triggering? Anybody in here ever experienced road rage? All right, so let me explain why there's a double whammy there. If you're driving, who's responsible for the safety space at the front end of your car? You are, right? And when somebody cuts you off, what did they just do? They took away your safety space. So they actually disrespected your safety space. They also took away your control over your safety space. It's a double whammy. Major trigger. So if we're angry, we can certainly trigger. You don't think about being lonely at work, I'm sure. But have you ever been circumvented from a meeting? You weren't included in the meeting you should have been in? Or somebody goes around you to get something done when they should have come to you? Could that be triggering? Yeah, I see some nodding heads in here. Tired. The brain needs sleep to regenerate overnight. If you don't get that, we're not in a grounded place. We don't have all of our mental capacities. You can also be tired of repetitive actions, like hearing no time and time again. Or you could be scared. Scared for your emotional safety, your physical safety, or your reputation. I'll give you an example, personal story. Many years ago, I was a software trainer. I taught people about their computers and their software. I actually taught them about their floppy disks. Yeah, I'm really dating myself, if you know what those are. And I talked to them about how to take apart their computer, what the hard drive looked like, and so forth. So imagine how humbling it was for me to be starting a training class about 15 years ago and not be able to figure out how to get the screen to display. For whatever reason, I was running late and I wasn't set up. I like to be set up and ready before people come in the room so that I can engage with them. I don't want to be trying to do the last minute setup. It's not professional. Well, that's where I was that morning. And because of that, I was a little bit frazzled. Could not figure out how to get the display to work. I actually had to call technical support to help me. Okay? My working memory of how to do that was out the window because I'd actually experienced not just a trigger, but I'd gone into an emotional, there's the E word again, block the doors. I'd gone into an emotional hijack state. Have you heard this term? Emotional hijack? Anybody? Can you guess what it would mean? The emotions in your brain have hijacked your logical brain to go somewhere you hadn't intended to go. That's where the term comes from. This is your brain. This is your brain on an emotional hijack. Okay? You've heard the lizard brain, right? It's kind of like our basic instinctual brain. Let me tell you what happens during a hijack. Remember I said emotional intelligence was about the art and the science? Here's the science. It's neuroscience. So there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and it's right between your ears, behind your eyes. Little bitty thing. Amygdala is actually the Greek word for almond, because it's almond-shaped. Its whole purpose in life is to protect you from threat, which is a good thing, right? The bad thing about the amygdala is it's shoot, ready, aim. Do you get it? It doesn't go through the logical processing before taking action. There's another part of the brain, the logical brain, which is here, the prefrontal cortex. It's responsible for all those wonderful things like logic, reasoning, processing complex thought, long-distance thinking, critical thinking, decision-making, all the stuff you need to be able to have cognitive decision-making and good interaction. Well, if the amygdala senses there's a threat, it's going to send a signal to the prefrontal cortex that says, hold on, I'm in charge. You can just take a vacation. I don't need you right now because there is an immediate and present danger that I have to protect us from. So all the resources in your body go to protecting you. You've heard of fight or flight, yes? Okay, that's where it's coming from. Think about it. Fear and anger actually live in your amygdala. So if there's a threat, the emotional brain takes over. The logical brain goes on vacation, taking with it your ability to process complex thought, to have big picture thinking. All that good stuff is gone. So how can you possibly have a good conversation with someone when you're in that state? You can't. And guess what? It lasts for about 20 minutes. And that's if you don't re-trigger yourself. And the other thing that happens is there are chemicals that get flushed into your body. Two main ones, cortisol and adrenaline. What does adrenaline do? Yeah, it makes your blood rush really fast. What does cortisol do? It clots, it thickens and clots your blood. So imagine if your blood is racing through your veins and it's clotting and it's racing and it's clotting. And what's that a recipe for? Disaster, right? Heart attack or stroke. That's why they say stress kills. And by the way, have you ever heard that cortisol is associated with belly fat? Do you know why? Because when you are stressed and triggered, all of your blood is going to your large muscle groups, your arms and your legs, so you can either fight that threat or flight from it. It's not going to your digestive tract. So we get fat. So another good reason not to be stressed, right? So, would you be interested if I could give you a way to manage and not have emotional hijacks? Have y'all had a hijack before? Yes? Surely you've had a conversation with your spouse or your children and you kind of got to the point where you couldn't even think and you had to walk out of the room? Yeah, right? And then 20 minutes later, all these thoughts come into your head. Ooh, I could have said that. Ooh, that would have really gotten them. Ooh, yeah, that one. That's your brain calming down, the prefrontal coming back on and going, oh, here are all the different ways I could have responded. So what I'm going to do is share with you some techniques that you can use to self-manage. So the first one you have to understand is you need to pause. Just pause. Be in that moment and be fully present, but pause. Research has shown that if you can name what you're feeling, you can tame it. Name it to tame it. Why do you think that is? When you can put a name to something, you're engaging what part of the brain? The logical part of the brain. So now you're already getting it to come back online. Because remember, it took a vacation. Name it to tame it. And there's a big difference in saying, I'm frustrated, and I'm feeling frustrated. What's the difference? If I'm frustrated, I'm just this big ball of frustration. If I feel frustrated, I can say, you know what, I'm a human being having an experience. Let me get my arms around what this experience is. Anyone's parents ever say, just take a deep breath when you get a little frazzled? Turns out that's pretty good advice because deep breathing actually rebalances your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system and get your blood flow back to normal. How about counting? Count to 10. When you get frustrated, just count to 10. There's actually science behind that as well. Because what part of the brain do you engage when you count? Logical brain. Again, you're pulling it back. online. And lastly, walk away. Anybody go to timeout? Did you have to go to timeout as a kid, or are you sending your kids to timeout ever? I know some of you had to go to timeout. All right, so timeout allows you to do what? Let your brain settle down. Let the prefrontal come back online. Remember, we need about 20 minutes for that to happen. You could also exercise. If you have a really bad hijack, exercise is good because it gets the blood flowing again. All right, so there are plenty of other techniques that I could share with you, but I promised to save some time for Q&A, so I'd like to do that. Do we want to have mics for people?
Okay, does anybody have any questions, comments?
How do you handle an employee who thinks he's smarter than you are and won't listen to what you want him to do, what you want her to?
Okay, so how do you handle an employee who thinks he's smarter than you and won't listen to you? Wow, have I seen this a million times? So the first thing is, if they think they're smarter than you, let them. Okay? Why do you think somebody wants to be heard? If I think I'm smarter than you, that means I want you to know that I'm smarter than you. So I'm going to tell you I'm smarter than you. If you don't listen to me, I'm threatened. For me to no longer feel threatened and have that urge to make you know how smart I am, you have to remove the threat from me. So actually, if you listen to me and let me know I've been heard, it will calm my brain so that I can have a little more of a balanced approach to the conversation. Not only that, you can use a coach approach. The coach approach is asking questions. Ask, don't tell is a great technique because the brain actually hears questions differently than it hears statements. Think about it. If I tell you, you have to do X, Y, Z, your only response is, let me decide what I feel about that. Okay, do I want to do that? Do I not want to do that? Versus, if I engage your brain by asking you, what do you think if you did this, how would that work out? Or what do you think you could do? Now your brain gets to have control, which we like control in our brain, so that we can then engage. Oh, well, I think I would do this. So use the coach approach by asking questions. Even honor the knowledge that I have. And I'll feel good about the fact that you're honoring my knowledge. So now I'm less apt to have to push on you my intellect because I don't feel like I have to, right? So give it a shot. Anyone else?
So I have a question. It's the opposite, actually. How do we as leaders in organizations deal with, the natural occurrence of our own inflated ego? As you win after win after win, and you're surrounded by people who tell you that you can do no wrong, is usually exactly when you fall. How can we as leaders create humility in what we do while still having confidence to pursue, risk?
Great question, great question. That comes back to self-regard. Remember, self-regard isn't just about confidence and ego. Self-regard is understanding not only your strengths, but your limitations. There's a balance, right? So we honor how we are strong, but we also honor where we aren't strong. So yes, we've had wins and wins and wins, but we don't lose sight of the fact that, is anybody in here perfect? Oh, there's one person back there. You guys are looking to see if somebody raised their hand. No, they didn't. They didn't. None of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. But the thing of it is to remember, self-regard is a balance of being confident as well as understanding where our limitations are. And if you stay in a place of curiosity, which is, I always can get better, I can always learn more, you'll have a better chance at doing that. Somebody down here had a question.
I want to come back to his question. What if the employee does not think he is really smarter than you?
What if the employee really is smarter than you? Lucky you. Yeah, lucky you. Because the best leaders hire people who are brighter than them, right? Because if they're not, what's the point? So yes, thank you for mentioning that.
Excuse me. I come to that same question, you know. The guy thinks he's still smarter than I am, okay? But he's not smart, and he's not a team player. And your answer was to pacify him. I would not pacify him. I'll bring you in, talk to him, and say, you're gone.
And say you're what?
And you're gone.
You're gone.
Yes. Because if he's not going to be a team player, he's not going to listen to me. I'm the boss, and he's not taking the direction. He's gone. I would not take him.
I understand. If you've attempted to work with him and he is not open and not receptive, I understand. So let's talk about the dynamics of what's going on in those kind of conversations. Because the brain plays a huge role there. And a lot of it is about fear and threat and control, right? Say again?
Who's control? Who's fear?
Both. So as the leader, we need to feel like we are in control. Are we not? Yes. We are the leader. Someone who thinks that they know what they're doing, like as an employee, don't we also feel like we are in control of what we're doing? So in any of those situations, you're going to have two brains going at it that both need to feel like they're in control. The one with the emotional intelligence advantage is the one who can acquiesce and say, okay, let me understand what it is you need. Because I can recognize, you don't actually say this, but in your mind, I can recognize there's a threat there. For whatever reason, there's a threat, and I need to neutralize it. And once you neutralize it, you can calm the brain so that they are going to listen. Because the reason, why don't we listen? We think we have a better answer. Right? And if someone's going to try to tell us differently, remember I said the brain hears things differently, a statement differently than it does a question? So instead of doing telling, we shift to asking because it will calm the brain. So this individual who doesn't listen, try asking them questions to get them to engage. You can certainly ask questions to help them understand. So if you ask them a question about some knowledge you know they don't have and they think they do, you can ask, so tell me about such and such. What's your theory on this? Or how are you going to approach this? They will uncover in their own explanation that it actually isn't working. You don't have to tell them. If they come to it on their own, it's a little easier to swallow because they're in control of their own conclusion. So taking a different approach as opposed to the traditional command and control, the newer approach is more of a coach approach, asking the questions to calm the brain so that they'll engage. You'll have, I promise you, better luck. Better luck.
This is the first time I'm hearing about emotional intelligence and all that. So in your experience now, because I've been a part of industries and companies in the past where there have been layoffs and whatnot, and so one of your slides had scared as one of the issues that would kind of maybe trigger you. So how far has this emotional intelligence come, I guess, in industry today? Because we used to have people come in, consultants come in all the time and talk about I guess just how you increase productivity, but this was never a topic. So is this kind of starting to be noticed to take off or I guess it could go so much further?
Yes.
If it was recognized a little bit more.
Yes. And thank you for bringing that up because when I started doing this about 15 years ago, I couldn't even use, you think you guys had a reaction to the E word. I couldn't use the E word. I couldn't talk about emotional intelligence to people because they had not heard of it. It has been growing over the last 15 years in awareness, but that's really part of my mission in life is to bring emotional intelligence to the forefront of my community, okay? For the very reason you stated, is that this is the first time you're hearing of it. It might be anybody else was the first time you've heard of it? Yeah. So thank goodness you came today, because now you've heard of it, and you know that it does have an impact. I mean, we've got all kinds of research, and there's a growing body of research that states all of the statistics of how important it is. So yes, I do think that it is growing, and it is going to be even more critical in the years to come. What's even more important than that, though, is that we need to have emotional intelligence taught in school from the time we are in kindergarten up. And they're starting to do that. I never heard about emotional intelligence when I was in school. It wasn't a thing. Absolutely. So I challenge you and everyone in the room to raise awareness around it. Talk to people about emotional intelligence. Tell them what you learned today. Because the more we spread the word, the quicker we will become more emotionally intelligent as a community. And honestly, I'm not kidding when I say it's my mission in life. It truly is my mission in life to spread the word around emotional intelligence and how important it is in our relationships, whether today's focus has been business, but also personally. I've seen a huge difference in my own life. I've seen a difference in the people that I work with. I can't stress enough how important it really is. Other question?
Got a question in the back. Okay.
Okay, we're going to take one last question.
I'll do that. Thank you very much for taking the time and training our lizard brains today. Really appreciate that. This is Rahim Lakhani from Toronto. My question is an interesting one. How do you work with someone who just won't shut up?
How do you work with someone who just won't shut up? Great question. So why do you think they won't shut up?
They always have an input, maybe because we're not listening, I don't know. But there is always that ongoing train, sometimes a train wreck, but there is that train.
Okay, so someone who is always talking wants to be what? Heard. So we want to acknowledge them when we can, but that, and I understand, could fuel the fire, right? In some cases, just being heard could satisfy that need, and now I don't feel like I have to talk so much. In other cases, it could be, oh, you're listening. I'm going to keep talking because it feels good. So that's when you have to have the presence of mind to be able to have a conversation and say, I appreciate your input. Can I ask a question? What do you think about X, Y, Z? Now you're controlling the conversation, and you get them to talk about what you want to talk about. And now you have an opportunity to input. I don't know if that's the specific situation you're talking about, but by asking them, you're directing the conversation, then you can contribute. Because I'm assuming if they're always talking, it's about what they want to talk about. So to have some balance, you can shift where the conversation goes. All right.
Wow, really fired up a conversation, didn't that?
Yeah, one more.
Yeah.
Okay,
So Dawn has some closing remarks, so we're going to let her finish really quickly.
just one thing. It's a riddle. What's the one thing that we all do when we first awaken? And it doesn't start with a B. No breathing, blinking, or going to the bathroom. Check your cell phone. I think a lot of people probably do that. Well, here's a hint. We do it about...
Thank God that we are alive.
Thank God that we're alive. Yes. I hope that we do that. Here's another hint. We do it about 50,000 times a day. What? 50,000 times a day? For some of us. No B's, no breathe. Self-talk. We're getting somewhere. Thinking and what? We make a choice. We either choose to check our cell phones or we choose to get up and go to the bathroom, we choose to hit the snooze, whatever. But we're making about 50,000 choices in a day. 60 to 90,000 thoughts, 50,000 of those are choices. And right now you're choosing whether or not to believe that statistic. Feel free to Google it. But if that's true, every moment of every day, you have choice. I hope you choose to use emotional intelligence. Thank you very much. Put this right here.
Wow, so that was some great insight. Dawn is going to be around this morning, and she's also going to be at the Diamond Ball tonight. So if you guys have more questions, feel free to reach out to her. So I know I'm definitely going to be using the process of arcing going forward in my career, and I hope you guys are too. After all, I really believe that it's all about making an impact, not an income. But a little income doesn't hurt either, right? So are we getting hangry yet? Yes, okay. So let's take a quick 15-minute break, and by 15 minutes, I mean 15 minutes, and then we'll see you guys back here. Thank you.